Hey everybody, and welcome to a new build series here in Trainz 2019, where we are going to be working on the CSX Rochester division from Rochester, New York, out west to Buffalo, New York. And this is going to be a really exciting build, in my opinion. We're going to be doing it in modern day. It's going to be in Trainz 2019. It's totally unlike anything I've done before. As you can see right in these beginning clips here, I'm working with a DEM map, so this is going to be totally prototypical. I'm trying to make this as accurate as possible, and we're going to be modeling something that exists in real life. So to get things started here, we are going to be beginning this build just a little bit east of Rochester, New York, in actually just a little bit east of a town east of Rochester called Fairport. And just a little bit of background on this area, and the reason I'm really excited to be doing this is that, as many of you may or may not know, I did just move from Rochester, New York. I did live there for a couple of years, and I spent a pretty considerable amount of time along the tracks in this area. So to me, it's always exciting to be building something that I'm familiar with in places that I've been, because then I can take elements of real experiences and finally put them into some sort of physical thing. Even though this isn't physical, it's a virtual thing, but I can actually apply those memories and those thoughts and all the photos and all the things that I collected while I was there and put it to use. So this is really exciting. I spent a lot of time on the trails that paralleled here. I guess a little bit of background on this part of the region. Right, what you're seeing here on the left is the Erie Canal, and the Erie Canal goes right through Rochester and goes west all the way out towards Buffalo, and the railroad tracks here pretty much parallel the Erie Canal for the most part. In fact, from my understanding of history, the railroad is what put this section of the Erie Canal basically out of business and made it obsolete. So anyway, there is a rail trail. Actually, it's not a rail trail, I guess. It would just be a bike trail. It's not a rail trail, it's a canal trail that parallels the Erie Canal and kind of sandwiches itself in between the train tracks and the canal. So I spent a lot of time biking on these trails, taking pictures, taking video. And in this series, I hope to incorporate some of these photos and videos from areas that I've been to and sort of replicate them as best as possible. And I have a few friends that are still in the area who are going to hook me up with some other photos and videos from other areas along the main line that I did not get to visit in my time out there. So I will be sharing some real life media and mix it into this project. So that's going to be really cool. So I'm really excited to do that. So some of the features of this route that are really exciting to me is it's a full Class 1 main line. So it's got all manner of Class 1 freight action that you can imagine. Double stacks, auto racks, junk trains, garbage trains, you name it. There's even a caboose operation that runs out of Goodman Yard right in Rochester, which is really cool. I did witness that a few times, and I'll maybe throw a couple clips in here. In addition to that, we've got Amtrak, which runs tons of trains east and west right through New York State, going out towards Chicago, Niagara Falls, and points east, even out to Boston, down to New York City, and so on and so forth. So that's going to be a great feature. Hopefully, maybe we can get some new Amtrak equipment for this game. Once we get that, that'll be really exciting. So high-speed trains, high-speed freights with a lot of Class 1... what am I trying to say here? A lot of passenger operations mixed in it. And then there's a lot of interchanges with local, would it be regional railroads or just local area railroads? So that'll be really fun to model as well. A lot of history here, a lot of different railroads to model. And I don't think that this build is going to be massively difficult. It's obviously going to be a huge undertaking because it's about 100 miles of main line to model, plus all the branches, the industries, and so on and so forth. But I think the benefit to this build for me is going to be, one, working with the DEM, because that sort of allows me to trace out a lot of things, and not to say that it's easier, because it certainly is not. I thought it would be easier, and so far it's been really challenging, more challenging than I had anticipated, but a lot of fun. But most of Western New York and Rochester and the area that this railroad runs through is pretty flat, so I'm not going to have to compete too much with crazy grades, mountains, mountainous scenery and stuff. So that'll make things a little bit easier. What's going to be really difficult is that there's a lot of city scenery to model, which I always seem to get myself wrapped up in. And it's some of my favorite stuff to model, I guess, but it's also some of the most time-consuming and difficult stuff to model. On the plus side, the area between Rochester and Buffalo is almost all farmland, so that should make things a little bit easier, albeit a little bit repetitive. So I don't know, we'll kind of see how things develop as I work my way through this build and progress with that. So in addition to that, working with a DEM file is interesting and challenging. I don't know how accurate the terrain features are. I did encounter some interesting terrain bugs with the Erie Canal right here, where the height of the water would be. It seems like the height of the water, it like mapped the top of the water, so I still had to carve out like the base of the canal, which the Erie Canal is only like 7 feet deep for the most part, so it was sort of easy to just gouge that out and raise and lower the water. Oh, I wanted to note, getting started with Trainz 19, this is probably, I mean, I've done some streams and stuff in 19, but this is like my first serious build. And the learning curve for me, I don't want to say that the learning curve is really high, because it's not necessarily really steep. It's just that there's a lot of new assets and a lot of new techniques to utilize here. So getting things started when I kicked off this build was a little rough in the beginning. I encountered a lot of issues with some track not linking up properly and things like that, but it was because I had an old beta version of Trainz 2019, and that was corrected pretty quickly. But in addition to that, I think I changed the track maybe 4 times in the course of this video. You'll see like 3 or 4 different types of track through here. And I am going to make use of all of the new Trainz 2019 features, including the TurfFX grass, PBR textures. I wanted to use some good PBR track for the main line, and I just ended up using some JR track that's built in for now. That's not, I think it's PBR track, but it's not procedural track. I meant to say procedural. I may have said PBR. I'm not sure, but I wanted to use some procedural track, but I haven't found any that match the area, whatever locale, very well. So I'm just using this JR track for now and working with that. One thing that I would like to mention as I texture this area, and it's something that I picked up on with Trainz 2019, man, it's late, is that when you're texturing with PBR textures, you have to keep the scale the same. So consider this a quote-unquote pro tip or whatever for Trainz 2019. If you are working with a bunch of different PBR textures, it's important to set the scale to one size, whether it be absolute minimum or all the way maxed out or somewhere in the middle, but keep every one of your textures that same scale. Otherwise, it won't mesh properly, and it's really hard to explain it without actually showing it to you. But if you have 2 different textures that are not the same scale, they won't blend properly. So you kind of get this weird, blurry, floaty texture thing happening. So if you've got 2019, you probably know what I'm talking about, and it was driving me nuts for the first major part of this build, where I was just trying to find the right textures to use. And again, this is all part of starting in a new game and starting with new assets and stuff like that, is finding the good looking grasses and the good looking dirt and all that kind of stuff. But finding the stuff that actually blended together, and it was just driving me bonkers why I kept getting these weird terrain differences. You might be able to see some of it happening in these close-up shots. And then I realized that if you set the scale, if the scale doesn't match, then you see what's happening on the screen here, where it's sort of overlapping on the track and then creating these weird polygon sort of things. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So pro tip there, if you're working with textures, just keep them all the same scale, and it helps a lot. Hopefully that will be the main issue that I deal with and can get around, going forward. But I'm awaiting some more good PBR textures. I think there's a good handful built in, and maybe they came off of the DLS, I'm not even sure. But just getting started with them, with what's available, it's pretty decent. I like these dirt textures. The grass textures are really nice, and I think once I start getting in and blending things a little bit more, it's going to look more cohesive, and it's going to be nice. It's going to be great, I think. I was really skeptical, honestly, at first of all the PBR stuff, but I think once we sort of crack the code and learn to work with it, it's going to be really cool. Same thing with the TurfFX. I'm still kind of skeptical of the TurfFX grass because it's a little complicated to use. I do use it in a few moments here on screen, but to be perfectly honest with you, I have no idea what I'm doing with it. I basically here, so I'm starting to lay it down here. I don't understand it at all. I've gone onto the wiki page and pretty much just copied the settings that are there for just basic green grass, and that's what I'm applying through here, and that's what I'm using. And I'm sure I'll figure these things out in time, but right now I'm kind of just working with, like, you know, the basic defaults as best as possible, and then from there I'll try to, you know, tweak things a little bit differently and I don't know, figure them out. I'm going to try to push it to the limits and break it and then figure out how it works. In terms of other scenery objects that I'm using here, I'm still sticking with the STRMM trees, which so far have been some of the best trees and shrubs, I think, to come to the DLS. So I'll be using a lot of those. And I am still using some of the spline grasses and regular grass assets to add some variety. Because with the TurfFX stuff, I don't know how to get more variety of stuff mixed in there. Like, I like a lot of texture. So I want little shrubs, I want some brown grass, some green grass, some weeds, and, you know, everything kind of mixed up. And I don't know if you can achieve that with TurfFX alone. So I'm sort of I'm blending multiple mediums together, and I don't know, that's just how I'm going to do it for now, unless somebody shows me otherwise. But here's a little dab of me using that technique, putting down the TurfFX, and then mixing in some spline grasses and some regular ground textures. The other thing with the TurfFX stuff is that you don't really have a whole lot of control over it. It kind of just splatters all over the place. When you know, with that little circle marquee, it doesn't stay within that circle marquee. So I don't know. I feel like I don't have as much control over it as I do with, like, putting a spline grass down, where I can actually put it exactly where I need it, and, you know, get those, like, nice thin strips of weeds that you can, like, put between the rails or next to the rails and that sort of thing. I like that look. So until I figure out a better technique, that's what I'll be using. And you know, whatever. I mean, if it works, it works. But we'll see. Time will tell, and I'm sure I'll get some comments from people who have been using 19 a little bit longer than me, who can tell me otherwise. So we'll see how that develops. Continuing on with just this detail area here, working with a dem for me is extraordinarily overwhelming. As I had said in the beginning, I was hoping that it would be easy, but I usually like to work in like chunks, or, like, you know, sequences or sections where I can get one area, like I do on the P&B, or like I did on the DBev. Like, here's an industry, and let's work on developing this industry, and then we'll do this other industry, and then I kind of fill in the area in between, sort of like connect the dots. When you're working with a DEM map, it's all spelled out for you what to put down, and for me, like, that's almost overwhelming. Like, I just don't know where to start. I get, like, paralysis by analysis, where I'll just sit there, and it's actually taken me a really long time to get started on this build and just develop it at all, because I just didn't know where to start and what to do. And it kind of shows a little bit in this scenicking sequence, where I was just like, all right, I'm gonna go over here, and then I'm gonna go over here, and let's bounce around a little tiny bit. So I don't know, that's just where I'm at with that, in my opinion there. But I think as I get into the flow of this build and can spend more time looking at it, and spend some more time, like, learning how these assets work and stuff like that, I'll get into a better groove where I can start kind of hammering out a lot of this stuff. And in terms of, like, what I'm going to show on camera, I'm going to do a lot of work off camera in between videos. So especially, like, lining up the track. Like, one of the things that one of the problems with the DEM is that the track, it lays out the track for you, but it's kind of just like a roller coaster. The spline points all over the place, and it's kind of a mess. So you really have to get in and tune it up and straighten things out. And as you saw, like, in the very beginning, there's certain sections of track that it didn't lay out, so I had to go in and lay that myself. I think the bulk of that I'm probably going to leave out of the video and do it just off camera, so that way when I start recording, I can kind of get into these the more fun stuff, you know, scenicking and finding buildings and just kind of messing around with some of the new tools and trying to, like, exploit the new tools in this game and textures and stuff like that. And this little area in the middle was kind of supposed to be like a swampy area, and I'm not too sure if I fully achieved that or not, but again, it's going to take some time to develop and find exactly the right assets that I want to use, especially with these new ones, and I'm sure more and more are coming to the download station every day. So that's going to be a lot of fun to see. But again, like a lot of stuff is going to be done off camera, and when I do shoot, I'm going to still try to keep it kind of linearly, where we're going to, start on the east side around Fairport. We'll work our way towards Rochester proper, and then we'll probably continue westward and head out to Buffalo, which is going to take a long time to get there, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to this build, and I'm looking forward to playing around a lot more on Trainz 2019. And that's it for the build for today. Here are a few cinematics using the new cinematic drone camera for Trainz 2019, which I really like. And I only just got a couple of cinematics here, just briefly, because I really didn't have a whole lot of time. But I really like this new camera system. A note for N3V, I wish you could slow it down because it is a little bit too fast when you're flying around. I would prefer to be able to have it a little bit more slow and precise. But that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed that and are looking forward to this series as much as I am. I'll see you guys in the next one.